I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be a spicy topic. I'm glad we kept it tame in the icebreakers, but now we'll zip it up a bit. So, what is the future of RevOps? So, those of you in the audience may be aware that we have been running executive think tanks across the country that tackle these topics. And now we're bringing it to the community. And I am so excited to hear what everyone here has to say, along with our wonderful panelists. So let's go from left to right. Prakash, why don't you start us off and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see that people from all over the world, and I know that this is end of quarter or end of month for almost everyone, but end of quarter for many folks. So thank you for spending time with us. I'm Prakash Raina. I'm one of the founder at Subscribe. Subscribe is a unified CPQ billing, subscription management, and revenue recognition system specifically built for SaaS. Before Subscribe, I was with Okta for 4+ years, managing the business technology there. So was part of the Okta when Okta was growing crazy. I was part of this journey when it grew from less than 100 million ARR to $1 billion ARR within 5 years. I have a lot of experience on the system side, but have worked very closely with a lot of RevOps leader or the RevOps team across the different companies. Very excited to share my perspective and of course hear from other panelists, but I'm sure that, Kamala is going to mention, but would love to hear anyone else's perspective through the chat if you have anything either supporting or not supporting to our argument. But yeah, super excited about this session. I'll pass it to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Overly. I lead go-to-market strategy and ops at Outreach. Prior to that, I was at Amazon in strategy and planning, and prior to that, led marketing operations and analytics for several companies, built marketing operations from the ground up, including implementation of Marketo and life cycle strategy and all of that. So a little bit of an interesting path into RevOps. So excited to join the conversation today.
Thanks, Anna. I'm so glad you're here to compliment and fill out the marketing side of this. I'm Jason Bieber, and I worked at Salesforce in sales and revenue operations for 6 years, way long time ago. And then I spent 6 more years there as a solution delivery leader and executive for the revenue operations and broader business system space. Now I'm the principal at Kumo Nami. I advise RevOps teams, systems teams, product teams, how to organize, optimize, and orchestrate their CRM with the related business systems. So very much got the systems focus. Very grateful to the RevOps Co-op and Prakash and Subscribe for bringing us together today.
So we'll jump into some polls in just a second, but wanted to talk about why we're talking about this. So what we noticed in the revenue operations community is that a lot of companies, they implement revenue operations very differently from company to company, even within the same vertical and company sector or size. So look at one mid-stage or growth SaaS company, and then look at another, and you're probably going to get a few different flavors within those companies of revenue operations. What surprised us even more is when we started doing the executive think tanks, is revenue operators themselves have very different opinions of what revenue operations should be, look like, support, and even be called within those same sectors and company segments. So we're bringing to everyone here today, including our excellent panelists, which departments should revenue operations support? And what I mean by this is systems, analytics, KPI measurement, reporting, all that good stuff. Which departments should RevOps do that stuff for? What I'm seeing is a lot different than what I was hearing at our think tanks. I can't wait to show this with folks. And we know that the right answer is always, it depends, but we're talking from in an ideal world, vague company profile. Let's keep it vague. What would your ideal organization look like? And it depends is the right answer, we know. I could just hear a bunch of people screaming that at their laptop screens. Okay, looks like we've settled. I'm going to share the results. 93% agreed sales. We have some variation on marketing and customer success, which was very expected. And then finance and product we threw in there because we did hear that quite a bit in our think tanks. just really quickly, Dylan put it best when he said East Coast, West Coast is like the Biggie Tupac rap battle. We had very vastly differing opinions on the coasts. And then people tend to be very agreeable and on the same page in the central. So let's move it to the panel. I'll let whoever wants to step in. Let's hear your hot takes and why you may not align with the central and East Coast, perhaps. Or maybe you do.
I can probably start and then I'll pass it to Anna and Jason. So one thing we saw in the poll as well as here is the sales and CS is probably most of the folks are saying. Even in the poll, I think that 93% was around the sales, which we all probably agree. 7% people are still not, which would love to hear from anyone who has an argument or something that, okay, why RevOps should not support sales. But that's probably the easy one. Everybody see that. CS is very different function in a very different organization. And I'll put my perspective based on the different stage of the company I interact with. A lot of time the CS becomes in a bigger company. If you go to Okta, there is an executive, as a C-level executive, just managing the CS or the customer first, customer success, customer support, whatever we call it from that org. And that becomes like a big org versus if the CS is part of the bigger umbrella of the CRO, where then RevOps is definitely part or that considered as a sales org, and RevOps is definitely supporting on that side. Marketing, I would say, in my experience, I have seen marketing is less, and I know we are calling it as a RevOps supporting. Support is, of course, a lot more, like RevOps does support almost a lot of function within the company. But if I just put a little bit more color to the support word is like when RevOps can influence or drive a lot of decision on those org, I have seen that, okay, marketing is probably less with a lot of companies, but I'll pass it to Anna because I know she has been more closer to the marketing ops and I'm sure that she has some perspective on that.
Yeah, I would 100% agree that as a general rule, the support. So if you think of RevOps and the support, if they ladder up to, I don't want to jump the gun on this one because I know we're going to get into who RevOps should report to. I guess I'll reveal my perspective now. But if they support the CRO, they should support all of the teams that is under that umbrella of that CRO org. I like to say RevOps often can be sales ops plus. And so we're really heavy on sales ops. And you even see that in the poll. Marketing, maybe sometimes. CS, maybe sometimes. But I think the real value is when they support all three. And it's just a well-oiled machine that's supporting that revenue engine across each of those groups. So could get into that a lot deeper, but as at Outreach, we've seen so much success in structuring our revenue operations team or go-to-market operations team that way, supporting marketing, sales, and CS.
I tried to answer the poll and I couldn't with yes. I think 25% of the respondents included product as part of the revenue operations functional scope, as well as finance. In particular, I think I'm thinking of the billing element of the sort of accounting function. And I think all of those are important factors to be in scope for revenue operations. I think it's important, and I think revenue operations has been a natural growth out of sales operations. I think there's a strong correlation with that function and the sales function, and with the migration from like most senior VP sales leader to CRO. I definitely understand that. I think what it often leaves behind are a couple sort of crippling artifacts for business operations as a whole, in particular around product operations, being able to have a function responsible for orchestrating like product and pricing agility across all the stakeholders within a company is something I think a central operations team is really well suited to do. And I can't think of a better team to do it in most organizations than revenue operations. It's not going to be the legal team and it's not going to be the HR team, right? Those are like, I think we can all agree HR and legal are not really part of revenue operations, certainly connected, certainly related, but those are different enough. But I feel strongly that from the product being created, priced, packaged, and then eventually being correctly billed in an understandable way for a customer so that we get money for the product, like that's all part of the revenue cycle in my mind. And the operations team around that is trying to facilitate optimal performance for any product that gets marketed, gets sold, needs service, needs to be renewed. And then finally, we collect some cash and pay people.
So I've been in sales, CS, and marketing ops before RevOps was a thing. So I have to say something. I'm so sorry, you guys, but this is going to happen. So I think we get hung up in three areas. One, we're naturally going to align with where our boss is focused. And if our boss is primarily focused on one department over another, it's kind of problematic. Another is I see a lot of companies calling one role for the entire department revenue operations. They don't have to hire multiple people. And I think people need to really realize that one job can only cover so many things because you only have so many hours in a day. And we still need to retain specialization in some of the tools like marketing automation, CRM, and then some of the customer success, particularly like predictive metrics areas. So I think it's short-sighted to not think that we're still going to have specialized roles and dotted lines to people. But I agree with all of you in that the original intent of revenue operations was to align the teams, and you really can't do that unless you have your hands in multiple systems, making sure they all work together really well in processes, all that good stuff. So we have some comments here. I've seen more scenarios where a cohesive RevOps team has individuals focusing on supporting one team. Is this a trend? I just spoke to that, I think, a little bit, where it's really hard to find one revenue operations professional who's embedded in each organization enough to quickly support them. Would you guys agree or disagree with that? Anna and Jason, have you seen specialization kind of work to the benefit, or do you want people with their hands in multiple places?
I can take this first. On my team, the way that I have designed it is that I have leaders that specialize in each of these functions: market MOPS, CS, CX ops, and sales ops. And that has worked really well for being able to get really close to those leaders. I am big on not just being order takers, which often can be the posture of operations teams, but instead being strategic partners. Very difficult to do that unless you're really embedded effectively within those teams. But with that being said, something that we have to work against is being siloed. And you have MOPS that then is part of marketing now and not really speaking to the CX ops person on the team because they're embedded in CX. So I think being aware of that, though, you can put practices in place that then work against that. And I have seen the value, understanding that's a risk of getting into a siloed approach. We have seen huge benefits to that specialization. And then we do things like strategic sessions ourselves as teams to say, how did these all work together? And we're in a lot of ways the glue across the entire CRO org by being able to be in that position. So that's how we approach it.
Oh, I hate to agree.
You spicier one. I'll give you a spicier one. Somebody made the comment that only sales and CS should be included in revenue operations. I think Anna and I feel very strongly about this, probably because I've been in marketing leadership as well. What do you guys think?
I think there's probably like we were just talking about, the dotted lines or the Voltron or the Captain Planet or whatever your sort of assembly reference for a superhero team is. That's what I see revenue operations as. It's the conductor, it's the orchestrator, it's the one who's got to make sense out of silos coming together and not look like an explosion happened.
I just get so mad that marketing isn't seen as revenue generating, because in B2C organizations, we're seen as the owners of the P&L. We have a lot more responsibilities. Why isn't that the case, especially in PLG orgs where we're so dependent on brand reputation? Anna, do you have anything to add, debate?
Yeah, I would say you have to ask yourself those questions. Do I really think, why would I exclude marketing from the revenue generating org, like a CRO org? Is it because you have to answer that question in order to say whether it should be excluded. I would say they absolutely are part of the revenue engine of the company. Therefore, they should absolutely be included. And also then you miss out on the powerful full life cycle of from prospect, MQL, handed over, worked, recycled, back over. You have this full entire end-to-end life cycle, and you just lop off basically a third of it. and then keep the sales and CX. I think that's missing a huge value that you could have by expanding that to the full life cycle.
How many teams have struggled with getting a universal definition of a lead? And how much better could we be as a business if we all agreed on that and optimized for it?
Just to throw it out there, I'm not sure that, okay, if I can justify all the point, but should it be all the department who carries a quota should be supported by RevOps? Marketing does carry a quota from many organizations. So is that plain definition, you can say that, okay, yeah, if the department is carrying a quota, then that should be supported, or that should have some angle with the RevOps, be it the CS, be it the PS, or marketing ops, or just the sales.
Okay, so I think we're going to move to the next question in the poll, and this is, which function should RevOps perform? So what do I mean by functions? And we know this is very heavily caveated by it depends, because as your organization matures, you're going to have different data governance, data requirements. But as a whole, ideal world, and I have seen data governance run through revenue operations in public companies, it just with heavy oversight by legal and other teams, but would love to hear what people feel. And this is one where we had vast differences in opinion on the coasts, which I was surprised by given my background starting in systems, but I'm biased. All right, I'm going to end the poll. So what's really interesting here is nearly every category has some people saying we shouldn't do it. Except for analytics and insights, there's 4% of folks who say, yeah, not really our thing. But everybody else, they waver the most on deal desk, which I was surprised by, because usually enablement is the wild card in our group discussions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to share what the coast said, and then I'll get to the panelists. So on the West Coast, the popular opinion was IPO is where RevOps goes to die, because they felt very strongly that what happens is data management and systems go into a centralized organization like IT or finance for the analytics. And then a lot of departments want specialized support again, and you become more siloed as a sign of maturity. Then on the East Coast, their opinion was, since systems are eventually going to go into IT, why do we even bother with them? Let's focus on requirements gathering, reporting setup. Yes, all those things are good, but the configuration can be centralized from the beginning, which from my standpoint was surprising. But I'd love to open it up to the floor to share your opinions. And I'm going to start combing through the comments because we just got a flood of them.
I'll say Joshua in the chat said, now there are several comments and I lost it. Okay. He takes over the large, more complex systems. For example, CRMs, you grow RevOps as the business owner. And that's how we've had a lot of success. We do have a central business systems team that owns the more technical, larger things like our Salesforce ownership. But then I also have a system ops team that sits on my team that is so closely integrated to our entire go-to-market team and can make a lot of those strategic decisions and actually build that roadmap and then identify and then pass it over to a more order taker team that will sit there and then be able to execute that body of work. So agree there. And then I have a very strong opinion on enablement. So I will just throw it out and then Jason and Prakash can react to it. But enablement does sit on my team currently, and I can't imagine it any other way. With our operations team, so much of what we're doing is then obviously enabled by the enablement team. And we, in prior lives, they've sat elsewhere, and then you have to go to them and say, hey, we were thinking of executing this, of doing X, Y, and Z, or we're making this update or whatever. Get buy-in. They may have a different roadmap. They may have a different perspective. You're trying to, it just becomes a little bit clunky versus what we found is having them under one umbrella. The execution and enablement go hand in hand. Immediately we're rolling and able to just, our speed to execution is incredibly faster than it would be if enablement sat outside of our team. So that's my thought on enablement.
I'll probably put on sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, after you, Prakash, please.
I'll probably start with the system side, and just to put on some comment on from Anna. If you really look at like the RevOps owning the system, if RevOps goes and open a rec to hire a tech people, would you really look for a Salesforce architect or a CRM architect, or you generally look for more like a business architect or business analyst role? And that's where some of these SaaS systems get mixed that, okay, is it an admin? Is it a functional role? Of course, the RevOps will have somebody who understands the system. That's how you can say that, okay, what I can build. But when it comes to the owning the system, if somebody is really looking for that, okay, I want to hire a technical architect on Salesforce or my CPQ or my whatever the other system, probably that role should not be RevOps. That should be owned by the IT if you're really looking for the tech side. And I said, like, some of these number or comment here are very specific to the IPOs or the big number. There are certain things which will be enforced by the regulation and all. You have to follow the audit, ITGC, the SOX control and all. Your audit team will not agree that, okay, your business has access to go and make the changes, whatever you want in the system. It is impacting the financial. So there are a lot of things which happens. But at the same time, if you go and look at the earliest stage company, yes, of course, the RevOps person who has come up to the RevOps or the lead of the RevOps, maybe their background was a technical background and they are very well versed with the technical side. I know one of the VP of RevOps or Ops, the person is so much technical that, okay, they write their own code, they can go and make the changes on the Salesforce or their own SQL, Snowflake and all, and that's all good. But I'm sure that, okay, at certain stage, that person will have to leave within that company, will have to leave that role to some other org. That's how I'll put it from more on the system side.
Super quickly, I have in a public company had admin access to systems. The controls over customer data were very strictly enforced and reviewed. So that was owned by finance primarily, and legal decided who could see what. So we didn't have issues with audits and people saying we weren't compliant because of how rigorously all that was maintained.
And that's where you define that, okay, is it part of the business side or is it the CIO org who is driving this whole thing?
Yeah, it was the business side actually, but Jason, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think it's interesting here on the West Coast, RevOps wants to own everything right up until it needs to withstand public audit scrutiny. And then someone else needs to deal with this now. I share Prakash's belief that the systems practice is different than the operations practice. They're complementary, they're dependent, but they're distinguishable, right? Talking about specialization, I think I see these as very different practices, having been on both sides of the table myself also. The way you train and operate a systems team is much more like a product team than a finance team doing analysis and planning and territory carving and things like that. Like they just run very differently.
Yeah.
And I think it takes an exceptional individual like the one that Prakash was just mentioning, who's got such a deep background in technical systems and has not only abandoned that, but has augmented it with an amazing like exposure and experience to all of the pitfalls of functional ownership of sales operations or marketing operations or success and services. All of those are real whole things all in themselves. And I've worked with some tremendously amazing, great people, and I don't know anybody who could do all of those things at scale. Of course, companies need to start somewhere. And I believe that this is where the next topic is going to go. I think you want to plant the tree where you want it to grow. Don't plant the tree where you're going to have to move it someplace else eventually. So I have the East Coast mentality here that once you've got 2 FTE of people focused on doing system administration, configuration, coding, whatever, that's enough people to have it be a separate practice. Now, where does that separate systems practice roll in? How distinct is it from operations? I think the operations things. And one thing I wanted to clarify, or I guess ask around, is analytics. Something I see RevOps often responsible for is like territory organization, quota setting, capacity planning. Is that all part of what we'd call analytics and analysis here? Because if so, yeah, I strongly agree that has to live in RevOps and across all those functions, right? You can't do capacity planning for sales without success being part of it and product being ready for it and marketing knowing how to generate it, right? So it's all got to be orchestrated and integrated in my mind when it comes to analytics in particular. And I agree on enablement, given that it means programming the wetware, getting people to adopt new policies and practices, pricing moves, whatever that is. Like that, I think, is absolutely a crucial revenue operations function as well. Deal desk, I can go either way. I definitely see that living in RevOps because it's usually also cross-functional. There's usually someone from legal and somebody from accounting on there anyway, representing, and data. Yeah. That's a whole other topic, I think.
So as somebody who has reported as a technical person into IT and been a technical person on the revenue operations side for years and years, I think the main point of frustration for me was when it was rolling up into IT, there was so much distance from the business that a lot of the requirements that were gathered were misinterpreted and not implemented correctly. And then there's this huge waste of time that goes in this back and forth. That's super painful. I'm not sure of a really crisp way around it. But I think that is my primary, when it's reporting centrally and you're so removed from the teams, it's really hard to maintain any sense of agility. So in smaller organizations, it just doesn't make sense for me. That's a no for me, dog.
And that's where that system ops for us, the way that we've worked with that is that system ops team is so deeply ingrained in our processes. And they're, Jason's, you were talking about people who are very technical and have that background. My system ops leader has an IT background and is very adept at navigating and building many of our systems, but also because of the proximity to RevOps and having been on RevOps for years, has that, is kind of a unicorn, has that knowledge of the RevOps processes, and so is able to communicate to business systems in a way in that language and exactly identify all of our requirements, but also so close to the business that is able to be that conduit between the two, which has worked very well.
Hang on to that unicorn.
Organizational design around unicorns is risky.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
if
but it's not
one,
just,
it's nice.
But it's not just her, it's the entire team to have that. They all have that understanding, again, of a technical, not the level of an architect, but are able to design, take our needs and communicate with the business system. So I would actually say you don't need a unicorn to be able to effectively fill that role if your guidelines for that role are clear enough and make sense for the person you're going to hire.
Yeah, I had a fantastic boss who's like, okay, people who are embedded in systems, you're going to go, and this is back in the day when reps still drove around, you're going to go sit in a car with somebody and see what they go through. And then you'll think differently about how you design the systems. And boy, was that person right. All right. GTM Ops or RevOps? I love and hate this one because people get so spicy and I have such strong feelings. So we're going to put the poll up. We didn't ask this at the think tank because we didn't think it was such a thing until the think tank started happening. So see a lot of comments in the chat. Josh, why don't we start with you? And I'm going to look at comments.
Yeah, I'll say RevOps is a newly coined word, right? So if you go and look into the big organization, probably will not find it. There's still business operations, GTM Ops, that people are carrying the name and department wise. So somebody defined in the chat that, okay, what's the GTM Ops? Is it just the sales and marketing versus the revenue is the sales, marketing, CS, some other function also that we spoke earlier. I do think that, okay, the revenue operation does increase the scope bigger than just the GTM Ops. If you really say that, it also has some fancy word as a revenue, I would say. So it's definitely sounds interesting wise. So if I have to pick, I'll probably stay with the revenue operation, but someone defined that, okay, there is a lot of accounting recruiter reaching out to the revenue operation because probably there is not a standard definition. If you say GTM ops, people are very well aware that, okay, what exactly it means. Marketing ops, because it has been in the industry for a long time. We are doing this webinar because there is not a standard definition of revenue operation, and it is going to take time. It's with every department, every new word that has come up in the industry, it does go through a life cycle before it gets standardized in a fashion. So probably this is the cycle, or this is the phase that we are going through with the revenue operation. I'm sure that, okay, with the time it will get more defined, well scoped, and it will just become a part of a very good org. Like if I was trying to put this comment earlier also, I was thinking in my mind, but if you look at the much bigger organization where there is, somebody mentioned about the COO, there is a president also. And the president, if you look at the president at Okta, the president was managing the CRO, CMO, chief customer officer. Would one day the chief revenue operation type of person or the role will also evolve, which will be much upper layer directly to the executive or the C-suite side? It may happen maybe one day, but that's only if the industry goes and really think about that, okay, what exactly RevOps. So I will probably stay with the RevOps, but as I said, like, there are very different definition across many organizations between the different phases, even in the bigger company, smaller company, or within the size of the company, same size of the company, there are different definitions. And that is what probably is raising all these questions.
I think names matter, and choose the name that fits the scope of work that your team is doing. So however you answered the first poll, that should help you guide. And maybe one of these three is not. I'm going to here submit my little comment. Like, I have a take that in a big enough organization, there's a COO who runs business operations, which includes part of that is revenue operations, and a smaller part of that is GTM operations, and a smaller part of that is sales operations. And so these things can all nest up in a big enough organization. I think, though, starting out, it's super valuable to be like explicitly clear, like what is and isn't in the scope of this team. That can break down the silos and just neutralize the conflicts that people are having, because you just name the thing what it actually is and not what you heard someone else had it or what you aspire to be someday. So I think pick the one that really truly is the scope of what you're going to do. And if it evolves over time, evolve the name with it.
So good question. What is included in RevOps that is not included in GTM Ops? Do you want to take this, Jason, or I can take a stab?
Yeah, what is in RevOps that is not in GTM Ops? Depending on what do you include CS in GTM or not? And if you don't, then that would be part of it. What could be in RevOps that's not in GTM Ops?
Yeah, go-to-market is really the strategy and execution of taking a product and a brand to market. And you do sell new products to existing customers. However, there's a ton of activities in retaining those customers that wouldn't necessarily be considered go-to-market.
I think I would actually say RevOps and go-to-market ops, even as you see the amount of conversation about what's included. Some people think RevOps includes the full gamut of CS, marketing, sales. Some people think go-to-market does. Some people, there's so much disagreement. And I think it sounds good to say we just need to be clear on what we mean by RevOps. I don't know that we're going to settle in very quickly to what go-to-market ops means versus RevOps. And so you need to do what works for your company. I heard that theme, but also what makes sense to your stakeholders. And so at Outreach, we actually used to have RevOps instead of go-to-market ops. You can see by my title, I did a rebrand to go-to-market ops. Our go-to-market umbrella does include CX as well. And so when I go to our head of marketing and I say I'm RevOps, often that is going to be interpreted as I'm sales ops. But I could probably do a couple things to help you out. And so versus when it's go-to-market ops and you have each of these go-to-market ops teams, everybody says, okay, I understand exactly. That ladders up. Now you have ops that ladders up to each of these go-to-market teams. And so that's something that has worked well for us. Everybody understands what that means. They understand this is ops supporting each of the go-to-market teams, and we've made it our own. We support strategy and execution. But with that, I may move into a role eventually where there's RevOps and they understand that and that makes sense. And I wouldn't be so hung up on it should be go-to-market ops or it should be RevOps. If it's working and everybody internally really understands what that role is and what your team does, and you're able to roadshow that effectively in either title, I think that's great. We could spend a lot of cycles.
Yeah. I think what hurts my heart is we're having to change labels to educate up and get people unhooked from what they think something is as opposed to what it was originally intended to be. And that happens all the time. It's just something that's been on my mind for a while.
So are you saying I want to understand more.
So I said this days and days ago, and I didn't want to say it because you mentioned the word rebrand, but days and days ago, I said, it really frustrates me that we're having to rebrand something instead of fixing it. And to me, go to market is a very specific motion as a marketer. That's how I think. It's a subset of the entire revenue window because as a company matures, most of your revenue is going to sit with your customer base. And your churn number, your retention, that's all going to be a huge focus. And that to me expands beyond it. But maybe I'm just stuck on the definition of the go-to-market motion as opposed to a go-to-market team. So
that's, I think, where it would say if I worked then with you, that would be, maybe it would be RevOps and not go-to-market. But I actually think that in my role and from my perspective, I want to do anything I can. Buy-in from the stakeholders and the people that I work with is so critical. If there's something that I can do to effectively roadshow the capabilities that my team offers, I want to do that. And that makes sense. I also would say it's not necessarily fixing what RevOps is, because there's much debate on even what RevOps encompasses. And so if you talk to one person, they would say, no, there's nothing to fix. That's 100% what we do. And to somebody else, they may say, yes, we need to fix that. It should be more, it should be broader and encompass more.
Yeah, to be fair, if I was moving to a new organization, I would care more about how the person I was reporting to thought of all this and what they called it. So
one way to think about, like, with the time, will these two coexist in one of the company, or
you probably already do
have one or the other? Maybe.
All right. So very related. And I love this one. It's also very spicy. We're going to put the poll up. Who should RevOps report to? It's a loaded question in some cases. So let's touch on the coasts, because this is where it got really spicy. This is our Biggie Tupac showdown. We've got a lot of opinions, both in Central and West, some variation between CFO, CRO. A lot of people said CEO, if you have somebody who's been in an operational role that's touched a lot of different things and can handle supporting those organizations. The East Coast skipped right past who they should report to and said that they should be the CRO. So, panel, I'm going to put it to you. What is a CRO? And do you think operations fits in that specific title?
Is the East Coast saying the CRO is different than the head of sales? Is that?
No, they think they can do it all. It's an operations person who has, so you would have a head of sales, marketing, and CS, and they would all roll up into a revenue operations CRO, an operations CRO, operationally minded. I've never met a CRO who hasn't closed deals themselves. They do exist, but they are rare.
I'll put the perspective in a little bit different, similar question answer, but a little bit different perspective is, if you ask a CRO that do you want to own the RevOps, probably most of the CRO will say yes. If you ask a CFO that, do you want to RevOps, you will not. Maybe there will be a lot of CFOs that say, probably I don't own it. The CEO and the bigger company, they will not. Early days, a lot of CEOs will say that, okay, the revenue operations should be directly under me. And I know some of those companies that is where. So like just putting the perspective from the other side, most of the CRO feel that, okay, the revenue operations should be part of their org.
So people have seen ops leaders transition into CRO. However, I would challenge, has anyone seen someone do that without actually being in a sales leadership position, a sales position, having carried a bag? Because what I see a lot of times is a lot of us in revenue operations, self-included, we want us to be in the C-suite. So we move into a specialized role and then move up that way. Maybe eventually we could be a CRO, but I haven't seen somebody just RevOps to CRO. And I don't see a lot of CEOs going, yeah, that makes sense to me. operations to sales to CRO. That makes sense. That kind of makes more sense to me. I don't know. Is there a world where there's an operational title that sits at equal footing to marketing, sales, CS leadership? And is the better question, is CRO effective as we're seeing it today? Is this too spicy?
COO is an option when you get to the point at where organizationally you have one. And that is right in the name. So I'd want to know why revenue operations wouldn't report there if there is a COO. CFO, I think, makes a lot of sense for traditional revenue operations, quota, capacity, attainment, planning. There's a lot of partnership that revenue operations has with the FP&A team of any group, but none of those people have ever held a number, right, in that way. CRO, I've seen not be wildly successful just because the person in that role will never have had the functional experience of all the things they're now expected to be the decision maker for. And you can only be effective in that role if you've got really strong VPs who are tenured and they know their area. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. And I think I have another thought, but it's not there yet.
I've
Let
seen
it percolate.
I saw somebody in the chat, or maybe Kamala, you said this. I can't remember exactly where I saw this, but a leader of go-to-market or revenue operations with leaders across marketing, CX, sales, and then the ops leader at the same level. And that's where I've found the most success, is being that strategic operational voice to the CRO, to the president of go-to-market, whatever the case is. And I also saw in the chat, which I think we've all experienced, is when you have a sales leader there, that's how you get this kind of sales heavy RevOps, because that is their focus and that is their primary view. And so by being that operations partner that spans all of those, you can be that voice of strategic vision and execution. And that's my favorite spot to report to and position in the company.
Each marketing, sales, and CS, they have such different skill sets, and that's what makes them special and good at what they do. They use different systems. If you look at the personality of a salesperson versus a marketer who may be very introverted or not, but prefer to be in the background and really think about messaging and just sit there in their little think tank, why aren't we embracing what makes those roles so great and letting those leaders really specialize in those roles? Because it's human nature to really focus on and fix what you know, and that's okay. It's really okay. I don't know. It's interesting. Prakash, I saw you took yourself off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's like I've seen in my past, and I'll put like a Okta example at that time. Let's say if you have in the company, you have a CRO, you have a CMO also, you have a chief customer officer. Now, where does the RevOps should report to? Because that's the reality. Like, of course, if there is only one leader as a CRO owning all of these, then yes, there are only two options, either the CRO or maybe the CEO. But if you have individual executive or C-suite running these departments, then what's the natural home for the RevOps? Is it the CRO? Is it CMO? Is it the CCO? Then we conflict with all the discussion that we had earlier. Then, okay, should it be directly under the COO or the CEO? Or is there a president? Then is it the president? So, of course, goes back to the company side and what all the other layer or the other org structure is. Because yeah, if you have all of these executive, it gets harder that where the RevOps should belong to.
It's also harder to argue to add another executive to the board.
For sure, yeah.
People have to value it and invest in it in order to be like, yes, that's where we want somebody sitting. I think it can happen, but maybe not today. All right. So we are near time. Are there any questions, comments? I saw a ton of great comments come through. They were aligned with what folks said, so I haven't called you out. But if you have any comments, I do want to make sure you have contact information for our hosts at Subscribe. And I really want to say I appreciate everybody's input. There may be a write-up that incorporates this along with our think tank output. And by May, there definitely will be, because I'll be the one writing it. Thank you all so much for participating. Does anyone have any parting thoughts they'd like to fire out there?
The last comment is good. Will the AI replace the RevOps?
No, God, no.
Analysis and forecasting tasks, not the whole thing, but yes.
Context is half the story. Having a human who understands the context and then can layer that on the analytics is what makes insights. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. But does anyone feel really strongly otherwise?
As I'm speaking on behalf of Outreach, which is an AI-powered sales execution platform, I can tell you it makes your life a whole lot easier. Is it going to take away my job? Certainly not. But is it going to make my job a lot easier? Yes.
Productivity booster, yes.
Yes.
100%.
I think systems jobs are going to like completely change. I think there's going to be way fewer of them. And I think what the target of their creation is going to be very different than has been for the last 20 years.
So you mean like more interactive conversational with the individual reps and then distilling that? Or do you mean the systems roles are moving into another org? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, not the restructuring, it won't be like designing screen flows and like user interfaces won't work like that anymore. You'll be connecting AI models to agents, to people, and
That makes
just will be
sense.
completely different than it is today.
All right. Thank you for a wonderful webinar, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Thanks, everyone.